Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. I thank you for joining me today for a new and very important step in our investigation into a massive, long-running fraud perpetrated by Volkswagen on hundreds of thousands of Americans. I am honored to be joined here today by my great colleague and partner in this investigation, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey. New York and Massachusetts are two of 6 states that have been a steering committee coordinating the activities of other states, and there are other states that are also involved in parallel investigations. I'm also pleased to be joined by several members of my team who've been working really tirelessly on this matter for quite a period of time. David Nachman, my senior enforcement counsel, Mike Myers, the affirmative section chief of the Environmental Protection Bureau. Other assistant attorneys general on the team are here with me, and Attorney General Healey will introduce the members of her team. So we're here today because we are announcing that today we are filing a major complaint against Volkswagen and its affiliates, Audi and Porsche, for their decades-long vehicle emissions fraud and their alleged cover-up of that fraud. Attorney General Brian Frosch of Maryland is also filing a case today. He couldn't be here for this announcement, but he is filing a similar suit. The idea of the, as set forth in great detail in our complaint, the idea that this level of fraud could take place and involve so many people at such high levels of these major international corporations for so long is appalling. It's hard, even for those of us who deal with high levels of crime, corruption, and conspiracy every day, to contemplate what happened here, and it is set forth in great detail in our complaints. We hope that this complaint and the resolution of this complaint will serve as a deterrent to any company that even thinks about pursuing the same sort of fraudulent, despicable course of conduct that we set forth in our pleadings. As you know already, Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche spent much of the last decade building a massive marketing campaign around claims that their diesel vehicles were, quote, clean and green. The alleged environmental friendliness of these vehicles was the core of these companies' marketing efforts. You can see the ad right here where VW claims that, quote, diesel has really cleaned up its act. This ad ran through 2014. Audi even advertised its A3 diesel sedan during the 2010 Super Bowl broadcast, hailing it as the green car of the year, and that single advertisement had more than 115 viewers at the time. It was the second most watched commercial in U.S. history. So we know that between 2008 and 2015, the 3 companies sold more than 25,000 of these cars to New Yorkers looking to buy a clean and green vehicle, and we know that those assertions, those statements, were nothing but lies. Volkswagen had gone to great lengths to outfit these diesel vehicles with hidden defeat devices. These devices made it appear during emissions testing that the cars were putting out legal amounts of soot and other harmful emissions, but in reality, when those cars were driven on a regular road, they were spewing emissions that were up to 40 times higher than the legal limit. All told, we estimate that these vehicles pumped an additional 45,000 tons of noxious pollutants into the air. These pollutants, known as nitrogen oxides, or NOx, are a disaster. They are a particular problem for places like New York City and Boston that have serious ozone problems. They're a primary component of smog. They cause respiratory problems like asthma, especially among the elderly and vulnerable children, disproportionately affect poor communities, and they are very damaging to our waterways. They pollute our waters, they damage fish and other sea life. Today's suit and the 9-month investigation that led to it are designed to hold Volkswagen accountable for their actions and to make sure that no car company again ever considers this type of widespread deception. What we found in our investigation was shocking and reveals a cunningly cynical fraud at the heart of this scandal. And as we lay out in great detail, and greater detail than has been set forth anywhere before, despite Volkswagen's claims that the defeat devices were installed by, quote, a couple of rogue engineers, that is far from the truth. Rather, the defeat devices were part of a willful and systemic scheme involving dozens of employees, executives, and officers up to the highest levels of these companies, including former CEO Martin Winterkorn. The defeat devices were installed over the span of 8 years by three different car companies, in 14 different model cars. And there were modifications made to suit different types of cars. There's communication back and forth about how you can modify the cheating devices. This was a widespread conspiracy involving many, many people. After reviewing thousands of internal company documents and emails, our complaint lays out Volkswagen's long-running campaign to install the defeat devices, modify and upgrade them, and to mislead and confuse regulators and the public. For more than a year before the EPA unmasked the defeat devices, it was well understood throughout the top ranks of the company that defeat devices pumped illegally high levels of pollutants into the air. As alleged in our suit, the top brass knew they were in violation of numerous state and federal consumer and environmental laws and regulations. But rather than own up to the fraud and correct it, Volkswagen's leadership chose to try to hide the facts. Take, for instance, a May 2014 letter sent to then CEO Martin Winterkorn from the head of Volkswagen's Group Quality Assurance Division. The quote from the letter is right here. The division head wrote, quote, "A thorough explanation for the dramatic increase in NOx emissions cannot be given to the authorities." That letter was sent nearly a year and a half before the scandal became public. And as we allege in our complaint, this cover-up was deep, wide, and long-lasting. It extended from frontline engineers throughout the corner offices of these companies and right into the CEO's suites. And throughout this nearly decade-long deception, so far we have found no evidence that a single executive at any level stepped forward and to simply say, no, this isn't right. And New York families and Massachusetts families and families across America have felt the pain that resulted from this fraudulent course of conduct. One New Yorker that bought one of these diesel cars told investigators in my office, quote, "We felt we had purchased a vehicle that had good performance and was environmentally sound. We were purposely deceived. This is fraud," close quote. Another consumer said it was, quote, "confusing and upsetting to be driving a vehicle that promised to be one of the greenest cars around, only to find out that may be utterly untrue." Well, we now know that it was utterly untrue. And not only did Volkswagen betray the public trust, it harmed our public health, it damaged our environment. That's unacceptable. And ladies and gentlemen, when I stood here last month to announce the partial settlement of other claims related to Volkswagen's misconduct, I said that the settlement did not prevent us from pursuing additional penalties against Volkswagen and its subsidiaries. Today, we're here to make good on that statement. The toxic corporate culture that produced this fraud must be stopped. That is the goal of our suit today, to deter any car company now or in the future from harming the planet, fleecing car owners, or lying to regulators. And I thank you for being here with us. And it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce my good friend and a terrific partner in this investigation, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey.
Good afternoon. Thank you, AG Schneiderman. And thank you for your partnership in our action today to hold Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche accountable for their brazen and intentional contempt of the law. I am delighted to be joined here today by Christopher Barry Smith from my office, who serves as first assistant, and by Jillian Feiner, who serves as chief of my false claims division, both of whom were lead counsel for our office on this matter. Today is about making one thing very clear, that Volkswagen, or any other car manufacturer for that matter, can no longer engage in this type of illegal behavior and expect to profit. Like New York, thousands of consumers in Massachusetts were deceived. More than 15,000 folks in Massachusetts bought these cars and were defrauded by Volkswagen's actions. Fleets of cars were dishonestly marketed and sold to consumers as an environmentally friendly, fun, and fuel-efficient alternative to its hybrid competitors. Meanwhile, all the while, these vehicles spewed harmful emissions into our air, putting the environment and our residents at risk. This clean diesel was nothing more than a dirty cover-up. The company's actions to increase sales, maximize profits, boost its bottom line were startling in their scope and their brazenness. As you can see from the lawsuits that our offices have filed today, this was not indeed the work of some one rogue employee, but rather a calculated, concerted effort by dozens of employees, officers, senior executives who worked together to orchestrate this plan to mislead regulators, researchers, and the public. Here to my left, you'll see an organizational chart that includes the names of many of the employees, including senior executives, who are mentioned specifically in the allegations contained in our complaints. Recent history reveals several instances of corporations that have misled investors, regulators, or consumers. This is nothing new, unfortunately. But I'm not sure that we've ever encountered a scheme quite as comprehensive as what Volkswagen attempted to pull off. Here we have 3 affiliated brands teaming up to make a conscious decision to break the law not just once, but over and over again. Despite suspicions, despite findings of wrongdoing, and in spite of eventual regulatory action. Volkswagen worked hard to cover up the existence of defeat devices for nearly a year and a half following the announcement of this study by researchers at West Virginia University in March of 2014 that actually alerted for the first time authorities to the diesel cars that were generating extremely high nitrogen oxide emissions in real-world driving conditions. That is when VW and Audi's cover-up began. From there, they repeatedly claimed that the cars met emissions requirements, even though they knew this wasn't true. They undertook sham software recalls. They made overly technical presentations designed to obfuscate and confuse regulators. They fought to prevent new models from being tested. And once tipped off, Volkswagen employees actually undertook to destroy incriminating documents. After VW was caught, the company did nothing to change its deceptive advertising. They confessed only after they had exhausted all of their efforts to confuse, misdirect, and obfuscate the real facts of what had happened. And throughout this entire time, as A.G. Schneiderman mentioned, not a single employee in that company, not one, came forward to say that something was wrong. This was a cover-up coordinated by the most senior people at the company. Let me share with you some of what our investigation has revealed. 1 week after the West Virginia study was revealed in March of 2014, Volkswagen wrote to executives in Germany to warn them of the authorities' suspicions. Quote, "Some presenters indicated that they suspected cheating. We will have to be careful with this going forward," said Volkswagen GM Stuart Johnson. Later, in May of 2014, then CEO Martin Winterkorn was told that, quote, "A thorough examination for the dramatic increase in nitrogen oxide emissions cannot be given to the authorities." That's an actual email that you see that was sent to Volkswagen's then CEO, saying again, a thorough explanation for high emissions cannot be given to the authorities. Later on that summer, in August of 2014, as U.S. authorities and investigators were ramping up their work, Volkswagen AG executive Oliver Schmidt, who's also on this organizational chart, said, quote, "V6, which is Audi's diesel vehicle, has the exact same issues, but not public yet. They have not been caught." And again, that's here on display in this visual. Fast forward to the spring of 2015. Volkswagen engineer Jürgen Peter, upon learning that regulators planned to conduct special tests that would reveal the defeat devices, panicked and in an email asked, quote, "Do we need to discuss next steps? Come up with a story, please." After that, Volkswagen announced that it was going to offer its customers a software recall. This was a total sham. The software recall was marketed as something that was going to enhance and optimize the functioning of their vehicle, and in fact was going to make sure that the light illuminating malfunctions would better work. When in fact, what this did was, on the one hand, that's what they told consumers. On the other hand, what they were telling authorities who were breathing down their neck was that this was going to be the actual recall that would provide the fix to deal with what had happened with these defeat devices. But of course, the recall did not work. The purported fix did not work, and they were called out about that. But not before they attempted, through multiple meetings with regulators, to confuse them with made-up stories and alternative theories as to what actually resulted in the higher emissions. Again, this is an example of a company that not only engaged in deception and fraud on a most brazen and widespread scale, but then undertook to cover up that activity through a series of actions over the following year and a half. Later on that summer, they continued to try to confuse regulators, including one meeting with regulators in June of 2015, where they actually said that it was important that we, meaning the company, not have any technical experts in the meeting. I assume that was to make it less likely that they would actually be able to answer the questions posed to them by authorities. And finally, in August of 2015, once it was well established that this matter was under serious investigation by any number of authorities, on advice from a lawyer at Volkswagen, employees appear to have destroyed incriminating documents. And those are just some of what we allege were actions taken, steps taken by Volkswagen to cover up and to continue its practice of deception. Look, it was well understood that these defeat devices were going to get them in trouble, but Volkswagen continued its damage control by publicly denying their existence over and over again. This months-long campaign to mislead regulators only delayed the inevitable. Documents that we have uncovered in our investigation reflect a corrupt corporate culture that had no regard for the law, no respect for the American people, and not a care for the environment and public health. And Volkswagen's conduct after the scandal first broke shows just how stubborn and unrepentant its corporate culture is. Volkswagen admitted to placing defeat devices in its 2.0-liter diesel cars a full year and a half after the troubling study came to light. Even after it admitted to cheating, Volkswagen failed to acknowledge it cheated on its larger 3.0 Audi vehicles until months later. Despite being informed of these issues, Porsche still used the defeat device and marketed its 2016 Porsche Cayenne as environmentally friendly. Earlier this year, to the amazement of all of us, Volkswagen's supervisory board recommended bonuses be paid over $70 million to members of its executive team and board, including a generous severance payment to Martin Winterkorn himself. It is clear that substantial penalties must be imposed on Volkswagen above and beyond the billions of dollars it has to pay to make American consumers whole and address the environmental harm that it has caused. Volkswagen showed an utter disregard for the American car-buying public, the environment, and the overall health effects of its conduct. Then President and CEO of Volkswagen Group of America, Michael Horn, may have said it best. Speaking for VW, he said, "We've totally screwed up." Yes, you have, Volkswagen. And now we need you to step up. We've stepped in to hold Volkswagen accountable to ensure that this type of harmful and cynical corporate decision-making, corporate fraud, carries real consequences. We need to make sure that this kind of conduct never occurs again. Thank you again, AG Schneiderman, for your work and your team's work on this matter, and thank you for inviting our office today.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Healy. It has been a pleasure working with you and your team, and we will continue to work together as we go forward. But ladies and gentlemen, it's important to realize that there are multiple levels of harm here. There are multiple levels of misconduct. Consumers were defrauded. The public was defrauded. The environment was damaged. But what is set forth in this complaint in a way that has not really been, story that's not really been told fully before, there was a third type of misconduct that, as an attorney, is particularly offensive. There was a total disregard for the rule of law. Volkswagen acted as though they were above the law. They had no respect for authorities in this country or in other countries, state, federal. They thought they were above the law. And the claims that we're bringing today and the facts set forth in the complaint make that staggeringly clear. And we have to ensure that the penalties they pay are steep enough so that no car company ever thinks, or no corporation of any kind ever thinks they can get away with something like this again. And with that, Matt Mittenthal will open it up to questions.
Say your name and what media outlet.
Nick Kuznets from Inside Climate News, and I actually have a question about the subpoenas and investigation from Lamar Smith's office.
We start with Volkswagen and then we'll go to another topic on Volkswagen.
You work with so much in New York Times. Can you talk a little bit about what you have, or anything you have that directly relates Matthias Mueller to any of the conduct you spoke about this going to top level? What about this?
Yes, that would be in paragraph 84 of the complaint. It is clear that Mr. Mueller was made aware of some aspects of this problem. They were having difficulties as they were preparing to bring Audi's 3.0 liter vehicles to the United States. They needed to expand the size of some of the defeat devices that they were using. Again, as set forth in the complaint, this is something that went on for years. They continued to work to tweak their defeat devices and to add to them, and it is clear that Mr. Mueller was at least aware of the problem as of July 2006. Obviously, we have further, the investigation is not completed, but he clearly was in the loop.
And how do you know that he was aware? And also, do you have anything to say about Mr. Matthias' current role at Volkswagen?
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear the last part.
So, do you have anything to say about Mr. Mueller's current role at Volkswagen, whether he should be leading?
Well, I think we have testimony linking him to this, and it's clear that he knew some of it. I think read the complaint and you can make your own decisions about what to do. Obviously, on this organizational chart, and it's a little hard to read but there are asterisks next to the people who left, but there are a lot of people still on that chart who have not left Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche. And again, as Attorney General Healy said, last month, the supervisory board, in an unbelievable display of disregard for the law and disregard for creating a corporate culture that respects the rule of law, awarded $70 million in bonuses to the management team that was clearly presided over this cover-up.
Do you believe Mr. Mueller needs to step down? Do you believe Mr. Mueller needs to step down?
I let you read the complaint and make that decision for yourself.
You mentioned defeat devices. Do you have anything to show us? Is something tangible? Or is it something that's software?
Well, we do not have a physical defeat device. There are some graphics that are out there that have been in publications. I think actually you can click on something in the New York Times that shows one of the defeat devices. But again, to understand the scope of this conspiracy, we're talking about multiple defeat devices, because these were very different types of vehicles. And what worked for a very small Volkswagen had to be modified for larger, more high-power cars, for higher-end vehicles. So it was year after year of refining and tweaking, and engineers and executives going back and forth about how this works. So there were a lot of different devices involved.
Anyone else on Volkswagen? Okay, move on to other topics.
Great. So again, Nick Kuznets from Inside Climate News, and this question is for both Mr. Schneiderman and Ms. Healy. On the subpoenas and investigation from Lamar Smith's office, I'm wondering if you plan to fight the subpoenas and if you have a strategy for doing that.
Well, the strategy that we have with respect to that investigation is the very strategy that you see employed today. You know, our job as state attorneys generals is to follow the facts, to ask questions. When we have reason to believe that there may be a violation of the law, it is our job to do the work to conduct the investigation into those matters. And today, I think you see how important that is. We were, for the first time, I believe, really able to tell the story of Volkswagen's widespread corporate fraud. It's an important story that the American public needs to hear. How this company engaged in a concerted, calculated effort using truly, literally, a cost-benefit analysis of the cost of complying with the law versus the benefit that would yield to its bottom line by flouting the law. That's the work of state attorneys generals. And with respect to the Exxon matter, we simply are undertaking an investigation that we undertake in the normal course, where we request information, request documents based on, in this instance, information that is publicly available now about what Exxon's scientists knew at a given time about the impacts, the effects in its industry, its product was going to have on the climate. All we're doing is simply asking questions based on that concern, and we will go where the facts lead. We intend to continue aggressively with our investigation. With respect to the inquiry from Representative Smith, we will respond appropriately next week to that request.
And just to make it clear, Lamar Smith chairs the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology remarkably. Our investigations into Exxon, it could not be more straightforward. These are investigations. In our case, we have a securities fraud law, business fraud law, and consumer fraud law. Those are the laws we're seeking to enforce in this investigation. It has nothing to do with suppressing other points of view on climate change. This is an effort to distract and divert us from our path. We will not be distracted and we will not be diverted.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.